Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healthy Leader Expert Forum. Every month in the Healthy Leader Inner Circle, we dive into a core leadership theme that will support and deepen our understanding of what it means to be a healthy leader in our lives, both personally and then also professionally. So we have a workbook, we do exercises and training and coaching calls, and we have the Healthy Leader Expert Forum where we bring in top notch leaders who walk the talk. So, this month we are talking about creating communication and the role of how we communicate within ourselves and how that translates in terms of how we communicate with others and how we connect with them and how we collaborate with them and how we create a culture of candor, trust, and courage and leadership. And so now it's my privilege to introduce today's guest, Dr. Matt Kincaid. Matt is the VP and the head of coaching at the Referent Group, and he is the co author of Permission to Speak Freely. And this is a leadership book that challenges the way that we think about trust and candor and the way that we communicate in leadership. And so his insights have been featured on Forbes.com. He has published research in leading journals. He coaches executives across industries and the military and has spoken internationally on the intersection of communication and performance. Now, I'll share with you what I admire most about Matt, and you'll see this, is his very refreshing and calm approach to leadership, and that he actually walks the talk and reminds us that it's not just a skill, it's a way of being. So, without further ado, welcome to the forum, Matt.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you for having me. Good to see you again. That's quite an introduction you gave, so I'll try not to disappoint your listeners here with my remarks.
Not going to happen. So, I'll throw you a softball here. We're going to start simple.
Yeah.
And I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey and what inspired you to write this amazing book, Permission to Speak Freely.
Well, about me, I've been teaching at a couple different colleges for the last 15 years. Before that, I owned a couple small businesses, did a couple startups. I always felt called, I guess you could say, to leadership, even from a young age and in school and in sports and things like that. So it's always been part of my world, maybe even before I realized it was part of my world. And so just got interested in this. I met Doug, the co-author, 15, 16 years ago. We started teaching together, leading workshops, leading programs for companies, and built that up. And then at some point, Doug has written a couple books prior to this, and we talked about a book, and which we've talked about 100 different books, but this one topic about organizational silence kept coming up, and we were working with groups. I was seeing it in the classroom at the college. Doug was also a college professor, and we were just seeing a lot of it. And we realized all the books we could read and most of the education we could find was really trying to teach people in organizations how to speak in more of an upward direction. So I'm going to teach you nurses how to talk to the doctor in the OR when something's going wrong. And so we despite all the education, some of it's really awesome. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we
Mhm.
use books like Difficult Conversations in our teaching, and there's some really good stuff. But we were just looking at this from a different angle where we're putting the kind of the onus of responsibility on the leader to create that climate and that culture where those conversations can happen because we felt like, man, there's already a power imbalance. The leader already has the power. The person who's being led is worried about being judged, fearful of bringing things up the leader might not want to hear, all that stuff. So there just seemed to be enough pressure already on the people being led. And we thought, man, we need to flip this on its head a little bit and see what happens. And so that's what led to this book. And part of it was we both had experiences and stories, and we were asking people for their stories, and we were hearing all of these real life experiences where people felt like, I can't say that to my leader. I can't do this. I can't do that. One of the questions we were asking people, this is before the book, and then we used some of this research in the book, was what's something you wish you could say to your leader, or what's some feedback you want to give your leader. And I remember I was teaching this executive communications class for a college in Washington State, and there's a guy in there who slams his fist onto the desk, red in the face, and he yells out, "You're asking me to choose between my livelihood and what I want to say." I think he said my ego and my livelihood.
It is in the book.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I can't remember if
I
that's true.
read
But
it.
anyway, yeah, so that story, I was like, wow, okay.
Oh,
And I thought he had some really heavy stuff. I was expecting he was gonna curse at his body, whatever. And
mhm,
what he had to share just did not to me seem like something he should be unable to share. And all he had to say was, I want my boss to know when he procrastinates, it makes my job more difficult. And I thought, wow, that's what you want to say. And I said, you're afraid. What do you think's going to happen if you say that? And he thought he would get fired. So we are like, wow, okay. Now, whether that's true, I doubt he would have gotten fired. I know the company he works for. I
mhm,
don't know his direct supervisor, but I don't know that that's true. But that's what he believed.
mhm.
And so that was stopping him from speaking up. And then Doug had some really great experiences and stories as well that just got us to the point where we thought, let's write about this. And it flowed out pretty quick. We wrote it pretty fast.
So there's so many things that you just said in that response that are so juicy. I will say that there are a couple of people who are on this call, several that I can see right now, who are also doing red team thinking. And so we just started up a new cohort, and we're talking about psychological safety and
Hmm.
how and I was we'll talk about this later too, about how there is this very natural power imbalance that I personally had not recognized, and that there are many
Hmm.
leaders who think that they're open, but just by virtue of their position, there's organizational silence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Yeah. I mean, that power dynamic is really powerful, for lack of a better word. I mean, and it can be suffocating for people.
and you use that word in here too. And
Yeah.
so one of the things I love about the way that you wrote this book is that are the three main sections. And so in the first section, you really dive into patience and emotional intelligence and all the things that we're trying to cultivate here in this group, like on the daily. And then in part two, you dive into the problem and how leaders suffocate, as you just said, or impede communication often unwittingly. And I'll have to admit that the favorite part of my book and where we're going to spend most of our time is in part three, right? Where you actually dive into how to create a culture of candor. And so you start off with this really great quote from Bruce Brown, who many people know is the creator of proactive coaching. And it says, if someone doesn't trust you, it doesn't matter how well you measure your words, the other person will misinterpret you. If someone trusts you implicitly, it doesn't matter how poorly you phrase something. The other person will assume that you meant well. Will you talk about why you started with that quote and the power of trust?
We had a handful of really good snippets or quotes that we knew we wanted to use. We were pulling the best stuff we had from years of teaching, and that one is one of the best. It's Bruce Brown's amazing, and he's close to us, and he's helped us and spoken for us and all kinds of things. But it just so much of leadership comes down to trust, and trust. This is a big, probably longer conversation, but I think trust is also not real well understood. And so we all say, do you trust this person? And we actually have a question that Doug started using years ago that just says, what does it mean to say I trust you? And then we go from there in our teaching. And we kind of all feel it, right? We know what it means. Oh, I trust this person or I don't, but we don't often step back and say, okay, what do I mean when I'm saying that? Do I trust? So you can break trust up into two buckets. You can say, okay, we talk about the head and the heart. You can think about it as competence and character,
Mm,
but they're different, right? So I may ask somebody to guest speak in one of my classes or in one of our programs at the referent group, and we're thinking probably mostly about their competence. Do they know the topic? Can they teach it? Versus character, I may ask someone to babysit my kids who I trust, our neighbor's daughter who used to do this till my kids got a little older. And I'm thinking a little bit about competence, but probably a little bit more about character, right? So I
mm.
wouldn't ask the girl who's babysitting to teach the class, but I wouldn't ask the person who's teaching the class necessarily to babysit. And so they're a little bit different. And so sometimes we have to step back and say, okay, what are we talking about? Um, what we know about trust is a few things. This idea that you see these quotes, it takes forever to build trust and only an instant to lose it.
Hmm.
Yes and no. It can take long to build trust, but that's not universally true. There are a lot of people who give trust by default. My mom's one of them. She'll trust everybody. The contractor who comes to work on the house, she just thinks everybody is a good person.
Hmm.
That's not always good because she's been taken advantage of by contractors and things like that. Not throwing contractors under the bus, but there's a fresh experience in my mind. Um, but there's also people that are slow. Like I don't give it, you have to earn it. And so that's another interesting question to ask ourselves as leaders. Am I a trust giver or do people have to earn it? If you are leading people who are trust givers, you actually start off with trust. It doesn't take forever to build it. You can lose it if you do things that are trust breakers, but so trust is just this thing that we're always trying to wrestle with and understand. There's a couple things to get to something practical that leaders can think about, do, practice. One of them is just this idea of this is a bit more about who you are, but what does it look like at work? Um, if you're selfless, people tend to gravitate towards that and trust you. And selflessness makes people feel like you have my best intentions in mind. You are not going to try to take advantage of me. You're not all about you. You're about the mission and the people and what we're trying to do here. And so that selfless leader can earn trust quickly. The other piece, and this is pretty widely written about at this point, but is just that idea of being able to allow yourself to be vulnerable. And that vulnerability piece, and we're not saying tell everyone in your organization, your deepest, darkest secrets. It's more, can I connect with people? Do people see me as a real human? And that's what we trust. So we trust real people that we can connect with and relate to. And if you are portraying the perfect persona or the perfect life, that's really hard to connect to.
Mm.
Quick story. I knew a sports coach. He was a high school basketball coach, and he kind of portrayed that image, the white picket fence, every day is the best day of his life, all of these things that we just know as humans just aren't true. Like show me
Baseball.
something you're struggling with, share a mistake, share a weakness. And this coach struggled all the years with coaching because his players, this wasn't like research. I just was observing, but I think he struggled because people couldn't really relate to that. Like none of us are living that life. Like life is messy and we all make mistakes and we wrestle with things and we struggle and so that is the type of person we connect with and we relate to. And so that is the vulnerability piece is admitting mistakes, sharing challenges, asking for help. All of those things are
Mhm.
really good trust builders because now we're connecting with people and that's where that trust starts to happen. And probably to your original question, why we used it, it's just so important because if you don't have it, it's really hard to lead.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you said you gave it a good example of what selfless means in terms of like honestly do have your best intentions at heart, and I
Yeah.
really am looking out as well as trying to get the mission accomplished. I feel like I was working with somebody just a couple days ago who said that they have somebody who constantly is like, "You guys are the best. You're the
Mm,
ones that I am here with." And so his intentions are great, but it's almost like this positive facade
mm.
that is also feels a little disingenuous. And I hadn't really thought about it like that.
So yeah, so what say more, what's your question? I don't know if I have an answer, but
Well, so what can we do? So that is one example of a facade. What
yeah.
can we do if we are also trying to portray like, okay, we got this, we're getting it, and then also be vulnerable at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the art and that's the dance. I mean, there are people that are that way. Um, and I think positivity and enthusiasm and hope and optimism are all wonderful things. And I think you do have to have an element of that when you lead so you can get
Mhm.
people moving and they have to see, wow, our leader believes we can do this. But there's another piece of that where people have to, this gets into some other stuff, but expectancy theory and things like that, but people have to believe it's achievable. And so you can be rah, rah, rah all day long, but if nobody believes it's achievable, nobody's going to get behind it. Now, that's also challenging because sometimes people are capable of more than they believe they are, right?
Right, right.
So there's this art in there, and I think people have to be able to connect with this idea like we can do this, it's achievable. Um, because if it's just a pie in the sky and everyone's like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna, achieve that goal next week or whatever you're asking me, then it's not gonna work. Your enthusiasm is it
Yeah.
does it is disingenuine, and because now what you're doing is you're losing trust. And you could
Hmm.
probably I haven't thought of this till right now, but you could probably connect that back to that competence piece of trust. Okay, this leader is so incompetent, they actually think we can get that goal by Thursday. There's no way.
That's
Right. So
interesting.
now all of a sudden, maybe we're not trusting that leader because we're like, they are out to lunch, right? Pie in the
Yeah,
sky, this will
right.
never work. So I think it does still come back to that trust piece. And your message has to be believable for people to get behind it.
Hmm. I'm going to throw this in here. The other piece that I work with, if I'm with individual leaders, and we're kind of talking here about team trust, is their ability to trust themselves. And I think everything that you're saying, right? Competence and capability, plus also this connectedness, it also belongs to you in the way that you're leading yourself. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, what jumped out at me was we were talking for a couple minutes right before we went live, but I have a daughter who's a ninth grader and she's playing soccer and she hasn't played a lot of soccer. So it's a little bit new to her. She's played it just for a couple years on a not competitive team in a sort of a side league sort of, but she's really athletic and she's really capable and she's doing well at tryouts at a big high school where we live in Washington State. And so I've been thinking about this because her biggest hurdle right now is her own belief in herself, her own confidence, and her narrative is kind of defaulting to I don't have as much experience, I'm not as good. And I'm like, you might not, but you are as good and you're showing up and she's doing super well, but there is that piece and I think that's the value of the leader being able to provide some perspective
Mm.
and try to fuel that self-belief. And I think the perspective really helps. So she got home from tryouts. It was the third day, yes, last night, and she did well the first two last night. She got in the car and she burst into tears and felt like she didn't do well, and the school she's trying out for didn't finish very high up in the league last year. So if she's not doing well there, then she's no good. That's where her brain goes. Now she's 14.
Sure. Right.
Uh, and so for me, it's a good leadership challenge, right? The perspective piece is like, okay, Clara, you are right now already after 2 days on the third day practicing with the varsity team. You haven't played much soccer and you're a ninth grader. This is the biggest school like the level of school. It's a 4A school in Washington State. There are 2,000 kids at this school. You are maybe you're upset with how you played tonight. Maybe this team's not great, but you've got to keep this in perspective. You're not at this little tiny school with, and being told we're probably going to cut you, and so some of it is, I think, just helping people understand what they're actually showing up like and how they're being viewed. So I actually encouraged her. I said, why don't you, she felt like she made several mistakes and felt confused about stuff because she's pretty new to soccer. So I said, why don't you send a message to your coach? They have this group me app, and well, what am I going to say? And so I kind of coached her through, just say, hey, I could really benefit if I could meet you early and just talk through what I'm supposed to do in certain situations and help me understand when you're young. Because he's kind of raising his voice, communicate more, communicate more. And she's saying, I don't even know what to say. I don't even know when or I'm doing. And so she sent this message kind of apprehensively. And then I actually know this coach a little bit because I coach high school basketball at the same school.
Hmm.
And so I don't know him very well, but I've met him a couple times, and he responded right away with, "Oh, you're doing so awesome. We love it." It totally changed. I mean, she went from tears to,
Oh,
oh, okay, maybe I'm doing okay, and so that I don't know what that means for your question, but I think there is an element of providing perspective and getting that feedback loop going a little bit so people aren't just stuck in the mud with their own narrative spinning through their head, which is telling them, I'm not good enough, I'm not fast enough, my footwork's not good enough, or whatever the case is in that
right.
situation. So I think those are really important to help fuel that self-belief.
Well, so I have to tell you, I'm one of those people. My second gout of strength is positivity. And I'm like, yes, with your parenting skills. Like, I wish I had known this stuff
Ah, yeah.
when I was raising my kiddos. And I love how you said perspective. And then you gave what we call the X, the external situation. You're out of school. This is the size. This is your experience. Like, and you weren't like, painting it. You were like, let's review what this situation truly is. And that's part of the perspective, as well as, how are you managing your thoughts?
And I probably get a little, I have to check myself a little because I'll say like you need to try to get your mind right, honey. Like this is so I'm almost get a little bit stern when I'm saying like
Mm,
this is the reality. Let me tell you, not what's going on in your mind. Like, and so I have to work on that a little bit, but I also want to be firm enough for her to know, like, I'm not blowing smoke. Like, this is actually there are 57 girls that tried out, and your coach's response said it's got you in the top 11 right now. You're 14. You've played 2 years of soccer. Like, let's get our mind right.
right.
And so it's
Let's
okay,
get the
Dad,
right facts.
like, yeah. So I need to probably get a little, I'm not generally super stern, but I just want her to know, like, hey, you know,
Yeah. You know
this
what's
is
really
what's
interesting
going on.
about that, about what you just said, is the idea that very often I think that, when we beat ourselves up, we've done that in the past. I know that I have, especially when I was going through West Point, like, get your shit together, like, come on. Like, that does kind of rile you up, and it doesn't really last. It can last for a little bit, but it's not something that you want to keep saying to yourself over and over and over again.
Yeah, and the other important thing I skipped over that is super important in those types of situations, whether it's with your kid or whether it's with somebody you're leading at work, that's not step one. So step one,
Mm,
at least for me, is always just empathy. And so we didn't talk about that till 40 minutes later at home. But
right.
initially in the car, she's upset, she's feeling what she's feeling. And if we try to solve people's feelings right away, we sort of indirectly discount those feelings. And that's a really bad thing to do, especially with kids, because your feelings are evoked. You don't control them. You feel what you feel. And so you can work on how do we respond to what we feel, which is what we worked on, 40, 45 minutes later, like, hey, okay.
Yeah.
But in the moment, it's just empathy. It's like empathy and pretty direct love. Like, hey, I I can, this I think I said, yeah, that stinks.
Yeah.
Like I know the feeling when when you don't do your best and that sucks. And the coach in her mind's yelling at her, probably not. They're outside on a huge field. He's probably got his voice louder so people can hear him. But I say, yeah, it doesn't feel good. Doesn't feel good to get called out. Doesn't feel good to get feedbacks that's not rosy. So, and I actually told her last night, like, hey, this isn't the time to decide this. Just, but if you get down this road and this just isn't something you want to do, that's okay. We don't care what you do. We're going to support what you want to do, but I don't care if you play soccer. I don't care if you don't want to go tomorrow, but let's talk about this a little bit later. And then it was more take a shower, let's get some food in you, and then let's message your coach. And then it all kind of got better, but we got to be really careful, especially with kids, that we don't try to solve their problems when they're flooded with emotion
Mhm.
because that gives them. I've read stuff about this. John Gottman's a professor at University of Washington who writes all about relationships and marriages and all families, and it's a big theme in a couple of his books that sends a message unintentionally that your feelings are wrong, and that
Mhm.
they've done these 30-year studies. If you follow that leads to some really bad outcomes for people as they get older, always thinking that they shouldn't be feeling what they're feeling, but we
Yeah.
don't control that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you brought that up in terms of recognizing that you are not your emotions, and that all emotions are okay, but not necessarily all behavior is okay. So that's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's that first piece. And I think that's related to another question I have down the road for you. But you just made me think of the African greeting, sawubona, which is I see you.
Hmm. Hmm.
See you. And I think that's true for people too.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
And how quickly we're waiting for someone to finish talking so that we can say what we want to say, versus really just talking to Doug and Tom about this, about a particular communication method we use, which is the first thing you do is you get out of yourself and you stop and you
Hmm.
step into their shoes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm really glad you brought that up. Okay, so you also, in it's page 78, you guys talk about the Pygmalion effect
Hmm.
and tell the story about the rats, and some were labeled smart, some not so smart, but in reality they were really the same. So can you speak to this idea of people rising or falling to expectations placed upon them?
Yeah, I mean, so the Pygmalion effect is essentially this idea that we get what we expect. And it's been well researched. A guy who gave us some insight into the book, Scott Snook, says the Pygmalion effect is the most underappreciated experiment in psychology and the one with probably the most powerful implications for leaders. And so it's just that idea. I mean, I could break it way down real simply. If
Do it.
everybody listening, if you think about in your life, hopefully, I can think of one in particular, but you maybe had more than one, but somebody who, when you were around that person, you felt like you were at your best. That could be a fifth grade teacher, a Girl Scout leader, a Little League coach, college professor. There's somebody where you felt like, man, I really do well with that person. And then think about why. And for me, it was I had a mentor and a professor in college who is just one of these guys that kind of breathes life into people. I mean, he just believes people are going to do great things and he encourages that. And you get in the presence of that. Um, I had I had 2 years of I struggled my first 2 years of college basketball,
Mhm.
and I was kind of under the microscope, and then you're walking on eggshells, and then you play worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. It's sort of the opposite of the Pygmalion effect.
Yep,
And
definitely.
then the next summer, I had met this guy before, but I spent a summer. He was a amazing. He's a psychologist, but he was a basketball player professionally in Europe, and he's still really good, and he's almost 60. And I played with him the whole summer, and I mean, it completely changed so many things about not just the way I was playing, but my own belief in myself. And nothing about my physical abilities had changed. It was just where was my head at? And I knew this person believed when I shot this, it was going in versus he's about to miss it, don't take that shot, And so the Pygmalion effect is super powerful. And ultimately, as leaders, we can affect people's performance based on what we believe in them, and a lot of it just comes out in the interactions, right? So
Mm,
let's take somebody who's maybe a poor performer or not up where we want them to get,
mhm.
and we are assuming things about that person no matter what, right? Our brain is assuming things.
Sure.
If we can be really intentional and really disciplined to say, I am going, and it's in the book, we talk about it being almost naive. Like we're going to assume the best. I'm going to assume this person's here for the right reasons. I'm going to assume the question that student just answered in class that derailed us a little bit was
Mm,
asked because they genuinely didn't understand. Uh, when somebody says, why are we doing it that way? I can assume they're trying to just, you know, take a jab at me or disrupt what we're doing, or I can assume that
mhm.
person genuinely wants to better understand, and that's on me. So
Right.
that's on on my assumptions. So I can assume is somebody being lazy and not getting the work done if they're a poor performer, or I can take a different route, which is okay. I'm going to assume they I didn't explain it well. They need clarification. I do this as a professor where if I give students a test and a bunch of them do poorly, I can easily, and a lot of people do, and I've done it before as well, I can easily assume, oh, they didn't prepare, slackers, whatever, mark it down.
Right.
Or I can assume, man, maybe I didn't teach that well. Maybe I didn't prepare them well. I can just take a different approach, and that different approach can generally kind of triggers me to be more curious. Okay, let's figure out what went wrong. And so the question I think about a lot is just what's really going on here. And that makes me dig and I have to find out. And then I can get to a better conclusion than just my own assumption about this person being lazy or not caring or whatever that is. And so that question is, what's really going on here can be super helpful and it can lead us to a better perspective. I mean, go back to the example I shared with my daughter.
Mhm.
Her asking her coach for feedback is a form of what's going on here. And his response was, he said, she actually wrote in her message, I feel awful and sad, and then I'm letting the team down. She's really sensitive. And she's like, should I write that? I said, you write whatever you want. It's your feelings.
Such a
And
dad.
well, I don't know. And he wrote back, we think we nobody's upset with you. You're doing awesome, all caps. And please don't ever leave practice feeling sad. Talk to me. And it was awesome. And so
Perfect
he's like,
coach.
talk to me tomorrow. And so, but that's a form of that, right? She could just be upset. She could get us riled up, like, oh, what was he doing yelling at her? You don't have to play for this guy. All the while, that's
Right.
not his perspective at all, right?
Just not
And
even
so,
right. Yeah.
yeah, and so I think some really good things happen when we start assuming the best in others. I mean, our brains start to shift from judgment to curiosity, which is a
Mm-hmm.
really nice place to be. I'm when I'm coaching people, I'm often just trying to encourage them to be a questions person, be a questions person, not an answers person, be a questions person.
That's good.
And then we start to make that environment more safe because when people feel like they're not being judged and that their leader expects good things, like the guy who I played basketball with all summer one year, 25 years ago, we start to strengthen the trust in that relationship. And then there becomes naturally like less blame because we're not going at the person in the same way, right? So instead of blame, it becomes more collaboration. So instead of saying you screwed this up, get it better, it's like, hey, what about this wasn't clear? What can I do to support you to get you where we need to go? And it's not in any way lowering your expectations. It's just saying, can we find a way to get the outcome, even though we're not there yet? And
Mm-hmm.
in most cases, the person doesn't know. I mean, when I work with younger coaches in sports, I'll say, hey, don't tell the kids, don't do this. Because I hear that all the time at youth sports. Don't do that. Don't do that. I said, tell them what you want them to do. Because you can say that and they now know not to do that, but they actually don't know what to do. Like,
Right.
you've kind of got a curse of knowledge going here and forgetting what it's like not to know things. And we do that, all the time. And so anyway, and then I think the other thing that happens is I think that cynicism kind of drains away and
Mm-hmm.
the whole relationship and climate and culture start just feels better, feels more positive.
Mm-hmm.
It's a long answer to your question. Sorry.
Oh, again, but no, 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 sorry. There's so many good nuggets in there. I'll pull one out of them. And what you're talking about when you say assume positive intent or unconditional positive regard, right, for somebody, they're
Yeah.
slightly different. And maybe you can speak to that. Um, to the ability to do that is a massive meta skill. And I don't think that we realize how often we are making tiny judgments. And we like to discern between judgment and discernment. So discernment, I'm not going to go walk down that dark alleyway in this particular neighborhood. There's been a certain amount of robberies, etc.
Sure.
And then judgment, like who is in that alleyway? That's a very different energy.
Yeah.
So, in terms of being able to even notice when we're doing that even very slightly, like, why is the person doing that? And it's just like this. So that assumption piece right there is a massive meta skill.
Yeah. I mean, I'm talking about it like, oh, this is something we should all do. It's like the hardest thing you'll ever do
Right.
because, and we get pushback and people say, well, what about, the student or the employee that's trying or the player that's trying to pull one over on you?
Right.
And my response is typically, look, the benefits from assuming positive intent
Mm-hmm.
far outweigh the negative consequences of somebody trying to pull one over on you, right? However, there is a there is a point where you have to make decisions because you will occasionally get a pattern or what you might call a repeat offender or something like that. It's
Right.
not to say there aren't consequences, like at some point you may have to make some tough decisions, and those decisions though are easier if you feel like you've given them the benefit of the doubt, you've assumed positive intent, you've done what you can do, and it just isn't working. Now it's a lot easier for me to, let somebody go if I need to. Not easier, but the decision is simpler.
It's
It's
cleaner.
simple but not easy, right? And so
Right.
I can, I'm not going to indefinitely
Right.
play that role with a person. I'm not really role, but I can't assume the best if it continues to not go well, and that
Yes.
will happen.
Yes. Yeah.
Either the person is just not going to get there. Maybe they're a bad fit for that role or that organization. There could be a whole bunch of reasons, and it doesn't have to be something wrong with this person or they're intentionally doing something
Right.
negative. It just may not work. It doesn't always work.
Doesn't always work. Logistically, it just may not work. So I'm really curious. I was trying to think in my own head if unconditional positive regard is the same as assuming positive intent. Do you think that's the same?
Um, I think the unconditional positive regard, kind of how you described, I think that's really about the person. And I view this person in a bright light versus a dark light.
Mm-hmm.
Positive intent, I think is kind of an output of that. So I view them in this positive place, and so I'm assuming their intentions are good. I
Right.
think they're closely related. I think of, I don't, this isn't the answer. This is just how I guess I think about it when you ask the question. But yeah, I think the unconditional positive regard is, I view that human, that person in a positive light. Doesn't mean they won't do things that aren't good, but I'm holding them in that place. And if
Mhm.
I do that, that it makes it easier for me to assume positive intent.
I get that, right. So one is I know who they be, and the other one is, oh, what are they doing? And I'm going to assume
Yeah,
the
I think
time
so.
of
That,
who they be. Yes, that's interesting.
that makes sense to me, at least right now in the moment. So,
We'll have to rewind this and see,
yeah,
right?
we'll have to look again later, but I think that's how I view it. I haven't really ever thought about it too much, but other than I kind of lump them together.
Right, right. It's interesting though. I mean, I personally really like those little nuances because it makes us understand or it invites us to understand how we are thinking and where that thinking comes from. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because as I was referencing the red teaming, we were just talking about, we have these particular tools like weighted anonymous feedback, so it's anonymous, so that we really can separate what we think about this person or what they've brought or who they are from the idea. And so
Hmm.
it's similar to that. And I'm just kind of thinking out loud here is that if we've already assumed positive intent and have unconditional regard, maybe we don't need weighted anonymous feedback because we already have a psychologically safe environment and people are able to communicate, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think yes and no. I think in an ideal world, if you've, created this perfect culture, I think that works. There is still enough fear in people, even if they're so
Mhm.
the ideal, like how we wrote the book, the ideal is people show up and they're not hesitating or apprehensive to share what they need to share, say the things they need to share.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, though, I don't know. I think that's really hard to achieve with everybody in the organization. You will get people who
Of course.
do it. Other people, even just people who may be more introverted, the notion of speaking up, whether they feel safe or not, is actually has some,
Mm.
takes a little courage, let's
Mhm.
say.
Mhm.
And so the anonymous feedback tool can be valuable because it's not a perfect thing either, but it can be valuable just even if your culture is really good because we know some things about leadership that don't go away as a general rule, and the higher you go in an organization, the research shows that the less honest people are with you, which is not ideal, right? So what happens is, you get this positional power, and people start to tell you a little bit more what they think you want to hear
Right.
versus maybe what they really want to tell you. And that's another reason we think this concept of speaking freely is so important because the closer we can get to speaking freely and the further we can get from that hesitation or that idea of I better tell the leader what he or she wants to hear, the
Right.
better. But that's still going to exist in there somewhere, maybe a bit more for certain people than others. But so sometimes if someone has the opportunity to give feedback in an anonymous way, it can still be pretty valuable for the leader.
That's actually valuable for me, and I'll share the story that Bryce Hoffman, who wrote Red Team Thinking, literally just shared earlier in the week, and it really had to do with somebody. I think it was a Joint Chiefs of Staff who was pinning on 4 stars to somebody, and he said, "Congratulations, you've just earned the rank where no one ever will tell you the truth again."
Interesting. Yeah, there's some truth to it, and the problem with that is as you go higher in organizations and you take on more responsibility, you actually need more help. So you need that feedback more than ever, and you need support more than ever, and yet people are tiptoeing around you sometimes. And so that's partly what this book is about is can we get them to stop tiptoeing and just give me what I need to hear? But that takes a lot of a strength and self assurance and self confidence on the leader's part because we're taking it all the way to the point where we want a culture of we want people that in a team to be working on something, and the leader walks in the room and they're like, yeah, hey, can you leave? Because we're in a pretty good place right here and we just don't want to be interrupted.
Right.
And that leader has to say, got it, great, out. But
Okay.
that's it's a jagged little pill to swallow sometimes, right? And so
I like that, and it's
yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, there's just that idea that can we get to that point? And I think when you do some of the stuff we talk about in the book and you're encouraging candor and you're building this trust, I think you can, and we've seen it. But it takes work and it takes discipline and it's not super easy.
And it takes consistency, right? Consistency, bad days, good days, all the days. And
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I'll kind of add to that is, yeah, to what you're saying, I think it takes practice. So we
Mhm.
just, and it takes practice not only for the leader, but it also takes practice for the people in the organization who that person is leading. And the practice, when I say practice, I'm thinking about a couple examples I've been around where people in the organization are, even though they feel like, man, the leader cares about us, that leader is selfless. I feel like I trust her. They still, it takes an element of courage to say what they want to say and to share their feedback and to ask the questions they're confused about. And so that takes practice. And
Mm.
so when we say practice, we're talking about, okay, take little steps, do something just over and over, little tiny things that you're a teeny bit uncomfortable, just try it. And the more we practice essentially being courageous when those big moments come and the question really matters or the feedback's really important, we're more set up and we're more ready to, to say what we need to say or ask that question. The other piece is if we can tie meaning. So the mission, Daniel Coyle talks about this in his book Culture Code. He talks about establishing a purpose. If when we have these moments where we need people to be courageous and we are trying to create that climate where we're encouraging it, we're encouraging it, we're encouraging it.
Mhm.
If we can tie that to our mission and to our meaning, we're going to have more success. So if I can go into my team and say, hey, we have this big, audacious goal, this big thing we're trying to achieve. The only way we achieve it is I need everything you got. So when you have a question, when you have feedback, I need it. Don't hesitate because we can't get there unless we get everything from everybody. And there's some good experiments that illustrate this as well, but that's sort of a baseline. I'm going to set the tone. We need you. We need everything you've got. And if we don't get it, we can't get where we need to go. So we're trying to tie this meaningful thing we're trying to achieve to
Mm.
the idea that we need everything you can give us, questions, feedback, uncertainties, uncomfortable things. We need it all. And that can kind of get people like, okay, I don't really want to say this. It's kind of scary, but I don't want us to fail. And this matters to me, what we're doing.
That is powerful. What you just said is really, really powerful because you're also saying, we need you. We need you. And so now
Mm.
you're creating community and connection. And that's, and again, Sawo Bono, like we need you. We need all that you bring to this table. That's powerful.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing to practice for sure. And it's also, I think that also that mind frame of we need all of you, I
Mm.
think that also helps us assume positive intent. Like I think it's sort of this thing that's going like this, right? This flywheel kind of and so these things start to work together. It's not a bunch of independent concepts that we have to memorize and practice. It's just this idea that, man, I've got good people and I believe in them and let's go do this thing together, right?
I want to pull the thread of what you said about practice because that's one of the things that we do. So we have the 3D methodology that we use here, which is discover, doing the exploration piece, and then we design a practice. And you just said, to pick a small thing. So that's designing a practice, and then you
Hmm.
dare to practice it. And so that is literally the courage piece. And then also, Ashik said it takes courage to speak to superior officers, but it needs courage to listen to subordinates as well. And so that point in time when you come up against the moment when you're like, oh, it's the time when I need to speak out, and that we're garnering that courage, then that is what you also were talking about, is like those tiny little practice. Where are you practicing it? Maybe it's not even in the office, maybe it's with your spouse, or maybe it's with, returning something at the store, or I used to have this like phobia of returning things, and I wouldn't want to return them. It just made me nervous to do that. So just lifting these tiny little weights, we call it going to the mental and the emotional gym, as you said, sets you up to align, who you want to be and what you want to say.
Yeah, and ideally we are creating, like if we go back to the book concepts, we're trying to make it where that's not scary. So we're trying to build this culture where people just share it, but it has to start somewhere, right? And so one of the things we talk about is dignify every try. So we want to validate all your attempts. And that looks different ways. It depends on the situation. I mean, it might be when you share something, I might, instead of responding, I might just pause. Force myself. If it's hard for you to pause, count to 10 in your head. Just let the silence and let it play out instead of you always having to finish the sentence or give the idea, or there's little things like that. I mean, and pausing in conversation and not spitting out an answer or a perspective is a discipline. It can be really hard. And so there's things like that you can do. When someone comes to you and offers a suggestion, thank them,
Mm,
encourage them, keep it coming, love it, keep the ideas coming. Something that Doug came up with that we have in the book says, if it's not life and death, say yes. So when somebody on your team comes to you with an idea or a suggestion, if it's not life and death, say yes. If the consequences of that, even if you think this isn't going to go well, aren't that big, go for it. Let them see you're willing to not only listen, but you're willing to put things in action that they came up with. That can be super powerful. If you validate my idea, I'm gonna give you more ideas. And we've also asked a lot of people, if you bring an idea to your leader and that leader undermines it or belittles you or says things that we've heard people share, says things like, hey, just do your job.
right.
Leave the ideas to me, just do your job.
Stay
We
home.
ask, yeah, how many times can you do that and still go back? And everyone's like, one. If I do that once and I feel judged or I feel stupid afterwards, I'm
Mm,
not putting myself in that situation again because it doesn't feel good. I don't want that. And those people have shared, I'm going to put my head down and I'm going to do my work. And I may look for a new job before too long because this is a tough environment to exist in, right? And now what you've done now is to maybe that idea was not great. Someone comes to you with an idea, you're like, leave the ideas to me. Now, tomorrow, they have an idea that could change the direction of your company for the better. It could change something really big. You're never going to hear it because they're not coming to you with that idea. Now you've shut them down, and now all those ideas are just going to sit on the sidelines, and it's not what you want. If you're wanting to lead a progressive, innovative company that's doing big things, you need those ideas.
Lori just said it's all about psychological safety and then trust, right? Well said, Lori. Lori is a West Pointer and also a Red Teamer as well. Um, okay, so I looked up at the time. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's already we're already 48 minutes in. So I want to ask you one other question because I have not heard a lot of people talk about the concept of macrothumia, right?
Hmm.
The long
Yeah.
suffering, and you all talk about it, and you were just kind of touching the edge of it. So will you explain what that is, and how leaders can use that to strengthen that inner calm muscle that you were just talking about?
Yeah, sure. So the idea of macrothumia is just sort of this patient tolerance, sometimes of even incompetence. And so it's this idea when somebody makes a mistake, somebody does something wrong, instead of ridiculing them and getting in their face, you're patient with them. It's just a different response to things that don't go well. It's the idea that, oh, that person really gave me some grace. I write a weekly kind of newsletter thing called Leadership Matters that goes out on LinkedIn and from our website. And I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, I actually wrote about macrothumia, and I shared a story. I saw this professor one time in a course. So when I was a young professor, sometimes we would go to other courses and watch the more veteran instructors teach and just see what we could learn. And so this professor, she was teaching I think it was either a speech class or I can't remember, but people were giving presentations, kind of presentations and speeches, and I think it was more of a business class than it was a presentation now that I think about it. But we're in the room, and the poor guy that was up there, he just kind of bombed it. I mean, it just did not go well. He was stumbling all over the place. His slides were awful. He got asked some questions at the end he really couldn't respond to. It looked like he tried to figure out how to do this the night before. It just wasn't good. And she could have done a lot of things. Now she's a super nice person. I don't think she would ridicule him too publicly, but she could have just failed him. I mean, it was F quality. And she went up to him afterwards, privately, as he left. I think she said, "Can I talk to you for a second?" And he showed up, and she said, "I don't think that went how you wanted it to, right?" And he's like, "No." She's like, "Not right now, but in the next few days, sometime this week or next, let's let's talk about what happened and how we can make it better.
Mm.
And I'm telling you that in that moment, I mean, it changed his body language, it changed his facial expression. I mean, everything changed. And I think what it told him was, I'm here to help you. I'm not here to critique you. Like, even though she kind of is as the instructor. I mean, and so that idea, and this could be anything. This could be in a conversation with your spouse or whatever, where you actually have plenty of reason to maybe come down harshly and you don't. And that can be a huge way to build trust and just a huge way to say what you said earlier is, hey, I've got your back. I
Hmm.
believe in you. Don't worry about it. Um, so it's sort of the lack of scolding, the lack of sarcasm, the lack of humiliating somebody when you easily have the justification to do so. Not that
Hmm.
you should ever humiliate
Right.
someone, but you
Right.
have plenty of reason to come down hard
Right.
on them and you don't. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that really that what you're talking about and that whole concept touches my heart because we very often hear, in this day and age and the political climate and the wars and all the stuff that's going on, it's so very easy to kind of latch onto that bandwagon and to keep, talking about one another, whether it's political parties or, office politics. It's very easy for us with our primal brain to connect and to be us against them. It's very easy to follow that, and it takes courage and strong character to disengage from that conversation and to bring something else to the table. So the way that you just explained that was just beautiful.
Yeah, I think another important part of macrothumia though is in order to pull it off, you have to be pretty self-aware. Like I've got to be aware of how I'm feeling and what I'm about to say and what I'm not about to say, and I got to pause or whatever I need. But that self-awareness piece is super important, and it's hard to become more self-aware, right? If you're not self-aware, you're just not, you don't even know you're not self-aware. And so the reflection piece we talk a lot about is a good tool. Can I reflect on my day each evening? However you do that, or in real time during the day, just how did that go? What could have gone better? And then this idea of feedback. And this is where building that trust is really important because you really want the honest feedback. You want people to call you out and check you. And sometimes we're really, we can have real blind spots we're unaware of. And there's an example. I know of a guy who he just wasn't getting feedback, and he felt like he was a nice guy, and he felt like, man, I'm all this stuff. And so what we heard from people was his body language was made him seem unapproachable. And
Mm.
he's like, what do you mean? I smile all the time. So anyway, this guy went ahead and had people film him at different times, like put a camera on him, follow me around from far away. He even knew what was happening. And, afterwards, it's just like he was saying like, oh, my face hurts. I was smiling so much, and then you watch the film and it's just like, he's just scowling, and he had no idea. He did not realize like his default mode
Yeah.
made him look kind of grumpy.
Yeah.
And so that's super good feedback for him, right? Where he can say like, I got this outside feedback now and I need to work on this and get better at this. And that's a little bit getting away from macrothumia, but just this idea of, man, cultivating as much self-awareness as you can is a really awesome thing because then it allows you to pause when your body doesn't want to and your brain doesn't want to, or
Mm.
provide feedback in another way, and then to lend grace to people when maybe everything inside you says, I want to get them.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I fundamentally believe, and it's Lori actually talked about the concept of giving grace, which is really, and all of this kind of connects together, is the ability to, as we give, we receive, and I feel like it's immediate, and that if we practice being in that state of mind and being self-aware, then there's no way that you can't see other people and see beyond the words and see, to what might really be going on. And it's just this great evolution of, it helps them and it helps you if we're releasing that judgy part and just sticking to discernment and unconditional positive regard and all of the great things that you've been talking about.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know this person, so I'm not trying to plug her book, but I've been reading this new book called, it's right here, called Me But Better, by Olga Kazan. And she's written a couple bestsellers. And the book is, so far, I'm not finished yet, I just started it, but it's essentially telling us and showing us the little tweaks we can make over time are going to have it's not it doesn't sound like a novel concept, but she's just saying, man, I can get better. And it's just these little tweaks in different places and then practicing those. And pretty soon those become my way of being. And then maybe I tweak a little more. And so it's not this idea that we need to reinvent ourselves overnight. It's more what's one little thing I'm going to try to do, and I'm going to try for every day or every hour or whatever it is for the next 3 weeks,
Right, right.
and kind of building off of that. So it's kind of an evolution, but it can become your reality if you want it to be and you're intentional about it.
Yeah, and setting your intention. And that's what we talk about with self-leadership is the idea that you are intentionally directing your thoughts, your emotions, your actions to a specific desired result. By the way, that takes energy. It takes
Yeah,
a
for
lot of
sure.
energy to
Yep.
change that neuroplasticity. So, what I'd like to do here is before we're going to close up officially, and then we'll open it up and talk about individual questions. Is before we close here officially, is there anything that you would like to highlight or point people to a resource or a project or anything that you want them to know about before we close up?
No, I mean nothing like a self plug. What you just said about energy, it's funny because I think a lot about sleep and nutrition. It's fundamental. I know tons of people do, but as fundamental and simple as that might sound, if you wanna be a more intentional leader, start there. Eat a little better and get some sleep.
Now,
Because
talking my language.
when your energy is not there, we aren't as good at being intentional and being disciplined. We kind of just we trigger easier. There's a lot of things that go on. And so I'm a big advocate of health and wellness.
Mm.
And honestly, I think it's a really good starting place for improving your leadership, which is not a tie we often make, but I've thought about that for years.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you thought about that because that's what we do. So we talk about fuel, rest, and movement, which is what you just
Mm,
said, and having quality, quantity, and frequency. So it doesn't have to be a particular program. It's just whatever works for you. Turn off Netflix 30 minutes earlier. If you don't have time to do an hour workout, then get up and stretch for 5 minutes or do 2 minutes of push up. It's just going from potential to kinetic energy. And I 100% agree with you that when you start with your urges for sugar and alcohol or hitting the snooze button and you're starting to manage that, that's some serious practice right there.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I'll do a plug for you guys for the referent group. I know it's just right around the corner, but they are doing an amazing leadership conference in Indianapolis on the 4th and the 5th of September. I'm going to be there. So Lori, Jim, Tom's going to be there too, Ashik, and everybody else. If you're interested, let me know. We can drop the link in for that. And then here's the very last question officially. If you could lead this group with one powerful takeaway that they could apply immediately, one of those small tweaks to lead with candor and confidence, what would that be?
Yeah. I would probably say try to lead with questions.
That was good.
I think too often we think we need to have all the answers and we don't, but we're well served if we can ask good questions. That's how we get what we need from our people. And
Keep questioning, keep
yeah,
questioning.
questions, be a questions person, not an answers person.
That was a big takeaway for me when you said that. So
Yeah.
thank you so much,
Yeah, of
Matt.
course.
This is just not enough time. And thank everyone for being here. Matt, thanks for bringing just so much clarity and insight to this conversation. You know that I appreciate your calm
Mm.
presence. And I want to let
Well,
everybody know that next month we're going to be diving into resiliency. And so we're going to be joined by Dr. Jason Jones, who is the author of Activator. And today's conversation and communication gives us a foundation of that because, as we have seen, that when leaders create environments internally and externally where truth and trust is strong, resiliency naturally follows. And we're going to be talking about emotional resiliency next month. So, Matt, again, thank you for your
yeah,
time.
of course. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate all the work you're doing and appreciate you having me on here. So,
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody, go forth and create a healthy day.